For thousands of years, Athens has watched power rise and fall with kings, councils, and empires. But here, centuries before our time, something different began. In open spaces, ordinary citizens gathered to argue, to decide, to rule themselves. This city did more than build temples to the gods. It changed a dominant idea that power belonged to the few. What emerged here was fragile, imperfect, unfinished, yet its influence would echo far beyond this place and time, shaping how later societies thought about power, rights, and participation. But how did such a radical concept come about? This is Athens, where democracy took shape. Before democracy, Athens was not a city of equals. Power was inherited, guarded, and concentrated in the hands of an aristocratic elite. Authority and law were theirs to decide. Ordinary citizens carried obligations without a voice. They farmed, fought, and borrowed, often from the very elites who ruled them. Debt could cost not only their land, but labor and personal freedom, with obligations passed to children. Law was unwritten, unevenly applied, and favored creditors. Freedom lost, rarely returned. By the late 7th century BC, land was concentrated in the hands of a few, and many citizens had lost their freedom. The city stood on the edge of unrest as armed revolt loomed. Power could answer with force, but risked civic collapse. Athens stood at a crossroads. The elites chose Solon to ease the tension, so he addressed the crisis at its source. He abolished the use of personal freedom as collateral for debt. Land and labor could still be lost, but no longer freedom. Those enslaved were freed, and citizens sold abroad were permitted to return. This became known as the shaking off of burdens. Law was written down and made public, and justice became accessible beyond elite families. Yet Solon did not dismantle the existing order. Political power remained tied to wealth. He sought balance, not revolution. Athens stabilized, and the stage was set for what would come next. For the first time, law was visible. Disputes were argued in public, and judgments became shared events. Citizens began to see themselves not only as subjects, but as participants in civic life. Yet power remained concentrated among elite families. And eventually, rivalries paralyzed decision-making. Into this deadlock, power was seized, and for 36 years, Athens lived under a tyrant and his sons. What began as stability hardened into repression. Resistance spread, and with Spartan support, the regime was eventually overthrown. Then another elite faction briefly imposed an oligarchy. Citizens resisted and forced its collapse. By now, two realities had converged. Civic participation had grown, and tyranny had revealed what concentrated power could become. The elites faced a choice, and return to rivalry and conflict was no longer acceptable. Cleisthenes, an elite statesman, proposed something unprecedented, turning civic participation into shared governance. With broad support, he reshaped how power itself was held around 508 BC. Political roles were open to all male citizens, regardless of wealth or family. Council members were chosen by lot from local districts, serving limited terms, ensuring constant rotation. All male citizens could gather as the assembly to debate and vote on law, policy, war, and peace. Justice was placed in public hands, with large citizen juries deciding verdicts and punishment. Safeguards like ostracism aimed to prevent power from concentrating again. Participation was no longer exceptional, it was routine. Athens had not merely reformed its laws, it had shifted power into the hands of its citizens. The experiment had begun. The period that followed is often called Classical Greece, and in Athens it marked democracy's height. Debate flourished, art and philosophy thrived. Yet democracy was repeatedly tested. In 480 BC, Athens was overrun and evacuated during the Persian invasion. The city burned, the Acropolis lay in ruins. Many expected democracy to give way to centralized rule. Instead, it endured. Athenians returned and rebuilt, and strengthened the institutions they governed themselves. Fearing another Persian invasion, Athens led the formation of the Delian League, becoming a maritime power. Ironically, while governing itself democratically, it ruled its allies by force, transforming alliance into empire. Tribute enriched Athens, funding its fleet and rebuilding the Acropolis, and paying citizens for public service, widening their participation. But that alarmed Sparta. In 431 BC, war broke out, and after nearly 3 decades of conflict, Athens was defeated in 404 BC with intervention by Persia. An oligarchy was imposed, but lasted only 2 months. Athenians had revolted and restored their democracy themselves. The experiment bent, but did not break. In the decades that followed, Athens turned from survival to reflection. It was in this period that Plato founded the Academy and wrote the Republic, shaped by lived experience of democracy's highs and lows. After defeat by Macedonia in 338 BC, Athens lost its independence. Democratic institutions survived only in limited form. This was also the age of Alexander the Great, and after Alexander's death, Athens attempted to reclaim its freedom. The attempt failed. In 322 BC, Macedonia imposed an oligarchy, and Athenian democracy came to an end. It did not collapse from within, but fell under external domination. In all, Athenian democracy endured for nearly 2 centuries. For the first time we know of, large numbers of ordinary citizens governed themselves, directly, collectively, and under law. Athenian democracy was fragile, imperfect, and incomplete. And yet, it introduced something unprecedented. It asked a question that would outlast empires. How can power be shared? And how can it be prevented from concentrating again? That question began here, in open spaces, under the sun. This is Athens, where democracy took shape. If you enjoyed this video, I invite you to explore my YouTube channel, where you'll find over 100 more travel adventures. Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell for new releases, and share my channel with your friends who love history and discovery.